Hello, and welcome to the first video of our Directus tutorial series. My name is Ben Haynes, and I'm the project lead here at Directus. Today will be a general overview of the Directus platform, including installation, initial project setup, basic data modeling, finding your way around the app, and then finally fetching some data with the API. This will be a quicker crash course with future videos covering these topics in more detail. Okay, first let's head over to the Directus documentation website. From here we can click on installation, and you can see there's a number of different installation options. We're going to go with the command line interface. It's very straightforward. Make sure that you're meeting the minimum requirements, and then we're going to grab this one-liner and we're going to paste it into our terminal. We can rename this, we're going to call it Monospace. That's going to be our demo project name. That will be the directory that's created where Directus is installed. Okay, and now we're presented with a list of different SQL vendors. Directus supports any SQL database. We're going to go ahead and move forward with MySQL. We've got MAMP installed locally on this machine, and so that's providing our database server. This is a completely empty database that's already been set up. We're going to choose the default database host in this case. Same thing with the port. And the database name, the database we created is called Monospace. And for my local setup, the database user and database password are both root. Once confirmed, those are saved in the environment file. And then we're prompted to set up our first admin user. All set. Now we're going to move into the directory that we just created, Monospace, and npx Directus start. And then we are notified that the server was started on port 8055. Head over to the browser, navigate to localhost 8055, which will redirect us to the admin app. And then we log in with the credentials we just configured within the CLI. When we log in, you'll see that everything's pretty stark. There's not too much going on here. The first thing we're going to do is head over to our project settings. So we can name our project, Monospace in this case. Throw a little URL in there for the project. We can give it a project color. So we'll give it the standard Directus green. We can upload a file for the logo from our computer. We'll drag on a file. That is the logo. That's an SVG. Next, we're going to upload a public foreground image, which is used on public pages, such as login and forgot password. So the foreground, we're going to do a different logo. This is going to be the full logo that we have. And then same thing for the background. We're going to drag just a star field, just any image really that has the contrast. And then just for an example, this is a short note. So that's just going to give us a sense of what this public page looks like, and we'll log out quickly and see that. Lots of other options here on the project page, but we can skip over that for now. We save these project settings. You can see instantly the logo has changed, and there's really no sense of Directus branding here. This is completely white labeled. If we log out, we're actually presented with a very branded login page. You can see our star field with our full logo, our short note at the bottom, and then our branded logo up here. We'll log back in. Okay, now let's head into the data model settings. This is where we create the collections and fields for organizing our content, design form layouts, and specify how values are saved to the database. We'll set the collection name to articles, which is also the table name. Singleton is used if you're only storing one item in this collection, such as an About Us page. And then we set up our primary key. Options include an auto-increment integer, which is the default, a universally unique identifier, and a manually entered string. And then we're shown some helper fields, which can be added automatically. These include status, which can give you the option for soft delete or for configuring workflows, sort, which enables manual drag and drop reordering, and then created on and created by, great fields for accountability. All of these can be edited, so you can change the names if you want to here. We'll leave them as the default. We hit save. And then we're presented with the form layout that we would see on this collection's item detail page. All of these fields can be reordered simply by dragging and dropping them. And you can also adjust the width and visibility from their right-hand context menu. Now let's set up a few more fields for this collection. We're going to start off with another standard field. We'll make a title. Now what we're entering here as the key for this field is actually the database column. We're going to take a look at that in the database directly in a moment. We can have a default here. It could be my title. And we can say that it requires a value. Next, these are options for the field, whether it's read-only, hidden. You can do helpful notes. Keep it short, maybe. And you can also do translation. So if you didn't want Directus to actually use the database collection or field names, the keys that come from the schema, you can actually override that. And you can do that in any number of languages. So you can make the entire app multilingual. Lots of flexibility there. Now that we have a column created in the database, this field, the next thing we would do is how do we want to interface with this data? How do we want to manage the data? The simplest example is a text input. There's a number of different options here. You can also create your own custom interfaces. So this, we're just going to go with the default, a text input. If we wanted to do some placeholders for that, choose the font. You know, if we wanted to make it monospace, if it was more technical, choose icons, etc. We can do all of that. After the interface is the display. The display is how the data or the value is represented in line throughout the application. So you can imagine if you had a star rating, maybe you want that visualized a little bit differently. When you have something that's relational or a color, maybe you want to see it as a swatch of color or the actual icon that you've selected. In this case, it's just a title. We're just going to choose the raw value. We save that and we have our title. Let's add a few more quickly, maybe another standard field. This time we'll call it text. And instead of the data type being string, we're going to use a text data type, which can hold a greater number of characters for the body copy of our article. Nothing special here, the same for the field. Now we have a couple different options. We can use Markdown, which is a more agnostic way of saving rich text, or WYSIWYG. We'll just use the HTML WYSIWYG for now. Different options for how this is presented. And in this case, we will use the formatted value. That'll actually strip out the HTML and a few other things like that just to clean it up a bit. Next, we'll select single file for an image. Our images could be inline in our rich text, but maybe this is a hero or something like that. The interface here, this is going to be an image, not just a PDF or a file, so we'll choose image. And same thing for the display, so we get a nice thumbnail. Excellent. And then the last thing we're going to add is we already have the date this article is created, but maybe we want a little bit more control over when this is published. So let's create a date published field, and this can actually let us control when this post becomes live. So we'll go down, we'll choose timestamp. We can say that on create of the article that we actually set the current time, or even on update, but in this case we're just going to leave it as blank. Again, date time, we'll use a 24-hour format. And then for the display, same thing, date time for how it's displayed inline, and we can actually say relative, so you can see, 5 minutes ago. Just a more human readable way to see when that article was published. Perfect. And then just for the sake of something different, we'll add a toggle in here. And maybe this is if it's featured. And so this will be a Boolean. It'll be false by default. And then we set up our interface. We can choose the icon for when it's on or off, and the display, setting up labels for if that is on or off. Custom icons, custom colors, etc. Very customizable. All right, so now we've created our fields. Now maybe we want to lay out the form a little bit better. Instead of just having a list of fields, maybe the date published, we can click on this icon on the right, the context menu, and let's make it half width. Same thing with status. And now we can drag this date published right next to status. Title, text, image, featured, I think all those can be full width, that's fine. But the point is you can rearrange these however you'd like. A little bit lower on the page for the collection setup. This is an article, so maybe we can choose an icon that kind of looks like an article is being written, and we could add a description here. And the display template. The display template is a way to configure how we represent items within a collection. So in this case, when we're looking at articles, whether that's in activity or from a relational interface elsewhere, how do we want to look up, browse, select items? So we're probably going to want to see the title, and then we can add some other characters in here just for formatting, and then let's select the date published. Whether this collection is hidden within the app or a singleton. The translations for this collection, this database table, and then a few other things. Because we chose that status field, we actually get an archive option, which will let us soft delete the articles within this collection. So these are all just automatic things that were set up when we created this collection because we chose those options. We're going to save this, and now we have our first collection. We can head over to the collections module in the sidebar and into the articles collection, and we can create our first article. You'll notice that the form is exactly as we just configured it. We're going to go ahead and make this first one published. We can make we'll set the date published to now, and my title, you can see that was the default. This was the note. Just below the field is displayed. All the required fields have this asterisk, all pretty common stuff. Put some lorem ipsum in here. And now for image, let's use this menu up here to select an item that's already in our library. So if we wanted to use this star field, this evening sky image, we can actually just select that. And we'll just make this featured. And we'll save our first item. Now let's configure what this layout looks like. This is how we're visualizing our articles. So quickly we want to maybe, we can choose between cards, tables, there's other layout options available as well. Let's go ahead and move status to the beginning, and then title obviously is pretty important, so we'll do a title next. And yeah, this looks pretty good. And now we can actually hover over the column headers and shrink this down. All of this configuration is being saved on my user. So if I log into a different device, this is actually going to be the exact same experience. And it's all saved per user. And you can actually, if you get this configured in the exact way you want, if you wanted to search through things, doing advanced filters, which we'll cover later, you can do all of that and then save it as a bookmark. So really, really powerful. Lots of different options here that we can cover later. But for now, let's take a look at how we are getting this data. So first, let's look at the database itself. If we refresh this was a fresh database, as you can see. We installed Directus, and it added these Directus tables. Everything, all the system information, everything that has to do with Directus is stored isolated in these tables. It does not, commingle with your data at all. Your data is kept pure and, completely separate from this system information. The articles collection that we just created through the Directus app is saved in the database as a regular SQL table. All of the fields we created are database columns with the appropriate data type that we selected. All of the default values, etc., everything is just pure SQL. And what's really powerful about this is the opposite is true. If we were to go here and create a new column, this will actually be dynamically rendered in the API and the app automatically. So if we create something called author and set it to a data type of variable character with a length of 100, so we've created that directly in the database, and this is something we call database mirroring. If we come back into Directus without doing anything, I'm just going to go into this item and hit refresh. This is just the form. So it's going to look at that data type, and it's actually going to create this author field, and we can go ahead and save whatever data we wanted into this field. Directus uses intelligent defaults for these fields that have not been configured. You can tell it hasn't been configured because it actually has this warning label over here that says database only. If we wanted to jazz it up a bit, choose a different interface, a different display, we can actually do that. So if we wanted to make this a drop down or have it manage a color value, anything like that, we can change that here to polish up the UI for that field throughout the app. And so at this point, we've set up our first collection called articles, created our first item within it, and configured our layout in this table view. But it's important to keep in mind how powerful these layouts are. We can actually go in and switch it to a cards view, update the title and the subtitle to show any fields that we want. These use the displays that we just configured. You can actually see the relational time here being used 5 minutes ago. This image first way of seeing things is really helpful depending on the data you're looking at, and we can adjust the size of these cards. We can also do the sort order and sort column, but we'll just keep it on the table view for now. Cruising through the rest of the application, we have a user directory, which shows all of our users and roles. Here's our admin user we are logged in as. We have a file library, which shows an aggregation of all assets that have been uploaded and has virtual folders for keeping them all organized. Documentation, so this is built-in documentation for the version of Directus that you're using now, and also with an API reference that is dynamic to your schema. So as you add database tables and fields, etc., all of that is represented in this dynamic API reference. So very, very powerful for handing off those technical documents automatically. So let's jump into how we access this information from the API. So we have the articles collection, and we can go to settings and then roles and permissions. From here you see that Directus installs with 2 roles by default. One is public, and that's always there. This controls, as you can see, what API data is available without authenticating. And then there's also this administrator role, which is for my administrator that I created. And this has all permissions. You can delete it, you can create new administrator roles, but the admin roles are for configuring settings, and they have all permission, all access. Next, let's head over to PAW. This is a tool that we can use to make it a little easier to work with the API. So let's go ahead and get our localhost 8055. And the endpoint that we're going to be looking at here is the main endpoint for fetching content. It's the items endpoint. And then after that, we're just going to look for articles. We run this and we get a 4.3 forbidden because we do not have access. We haven't authenticated and we haven't set anything to be public. All data is private by default. So we're going to go into Directus, into the public role, and you can see we only have one collection. It's pretty basic right now. But let's go ahead and turn on read access for this articles collection. And this is for the public role. This saves automatically. So if we come back here and run this command again, we get a 200. And now you can actually see all the data here. You can see the timestamp for the date published, the featured is true. We didn't set an author for this, but all of the data you'd expect is right here. We can go a little bit deeper. Permissions is very granular, so we don't want to spend too much time here. But I do want to show that there's more than just on and off. What we can actually do is use custom logic for the read. And so here we have the item permissions. So which items can be viewed or read within the articles publicly. And if we go to the docs and we search for something called filter rules right here, the filter rules, this is JSON that represents how these permissions manifest. So we can scroll down, you can see the syntax is pretty straightforward. It's field operator value. And actually one of these examples right here is kind of what we're looking for. We're going to go into Directus and we're just going to paste this right in here. So what this is saying is our field was actually called date published. And if the date published is less than now is a variable that we have, a dynamic variable that represents now. And so this is basically saying you have read access to articles if the article has a date published that is in the past. So we're sort of past that date published time. If we hit save and we come here and we hit refresh, it's still there. And if we go to create a new article, so we'll go in here and we'll create another one. This is going to be in the future. We can also make it published. Again, this is just something you can filter against. We're just going to set it to now, and then we'll set it a month from now. We got a lot of thinking to do on this one. Lorem ipsum. We don't need to upload everything here, and let's hit save. So now we have two items. One is my title and one is in the future. If we come back to paw and hit refresh, we're still only getting that one item because our permissions are set up so that you only get items if the date published is in the past, which is only true for one of these items. Now, just to show one other way that you can authenticate, you don't always want to make everything public. Maybe you're dealing with something on the server and you want to fetch things in a more controlled manner. If we go to our user, so this is my administrator user, it has access to everything, and you can actually enter a token down here. We're just going to enter one super secure called admin, and we're going to save that. Now, what you can do is actually access this. If we go to URL parameters, if you use the access token of that user, so the access token, and we just called it admin. Now, if we run this command again, we're not running it through in an unauthenticated way. We're running it with an administrator's admin token or access token. So we should be able to see all the items now because this has a higher permission set. So you can see that we have not only the my title that is published, but also this other in the future post down here. So we're getting all the information. So you can actually create roles and base permissions on very specific applications, and then use a user of that role, set a token for that user, and then access it in this manner to actually get very specific permission sets via the API. And that's about it. This was a super simple tutorial just going through the basics of Directus. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and keep an eye out for future tutorials where we'll cover things in greater detail. Thanks for watching.